All right. So today we're back. We gave Chris the hour off on our end. I know we're deep into another acquisition on our end too, but I felt like we need to bring Alex on. So we're with Alex Loebig, who's our head of corporate development here at the Pave. And I think she brings a really unique background, right? So I'm sure a lot of folks in this call have either thought about buying a company themselves, maybe in the corporate world and looking at, their options to invest, to build, to buy. And I think with Alex's background, she has the experience in both sides of kind of sharing, what it's like both in the corporate world doing it, but also now in the, startup roll-up type world too, about what that actually looks like. So Alex, if you want to give yourself a background and kind of, going through what you actually do here.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. Well, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me on with you, Sam. Agreed. It's nice to give Chris a little break so he can go, execute on some of the things we're working on. But so I joined the Pave, I guess, almost a year ago, which is kind of wild to think about, after 12 years in corporate America. And when I say corporate America, I mean so deep in corporate America. I started my career out of college at GE Capital in their rotational leadership program there with risk management. I was in underwriting for 2 years. And that really kind of set the foundation for where I thought I was going to go. After 2 years, when I was graduating from that program, GE Capital started divesting their portfolio. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to stick around for this. This isn't what I signed up for. So I actually had always thought that I would get into consulting eventually, because to be really frank, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And kind of every step along the way was more tools in my tool belt. So a lot of people from my program had moved over to Deloitte, and the partner who interviewed me, I'll never forget her saying it. She said, "We love hiring people from GE, from your leadership program, because they train you so well and you're ready to hit the ground running." And from that day on, for the next 10 years, I was at Deloitte Consulting. They sponsored me to go back and get my MBA at Kellogg, came back for another almost 4 years. And at the end of it, I was kind of looking around and I was like, is this what I want to do forever? And it was getting to that point. I was on the partner track, and when you're committed, you're committed. And I was committed until I started to look around and think, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. And that is, that was my first step into the Pave.
And okay, so there's a few things I want to touch on there too. So first, the MBA route. I think a lot of searchers who are thinking, hey, I want to go buy a company, I want to run myself. Do you think the MBA route is actually helpful, especially factoring in two things, right? One is the opportunity cost, both in terms of time and money. And then two, do you think it's actually helpful in making you better as a leader, as an operator, all those things?
It's funny you say that, because I reflect a lot about the MBA, and that's probably one of the conversations I have most with people who reach out to me of like, I'm thinking about getting my MBA. Or at Deloitte, I had that a lot too, right? They have a program where you can qualify to be sponsored. And I think that really changes the opportunity cost, right? When they're paying for you to go back, you owe them a few years after, right? So let's take that out of the equation for right now. But I do think that, and it's funny you say this, because a lot of my friends, they're from different backgrounds, and I think there is a use case for business school. I really do. I do firmly believe that going back full time, if you're going to do it, go all in, because your network is your net worth. And I have met some amazing people in a lot of different industries during my time at Kellogg. I also think that it's not for everyone, because like you said, people say, the hard knocks MBA, go just work and get through it. I think that there is value in the MBA, but it kind of depends what you want to do. I have a lot of friends who, went the search fund route, and then 3 years later, they're still looking for a company, right? So it's a hard question to answer, to be frank.
Yeah. And then so kind of pivoting a little bit too, you mentioned at Deloitte, right? And one of the bigger firms, you start as an associate, you move your way up, right? And your goal there is to become a partner. But you look at the partner track too, is what does that look like? So walk me through, if you would have, sucked it up and stayed there, what does that look like both in terms of the work you're doing, the financial
Mhm.
compensation, and then the time you're spending to go achieve that partner type track?
Yeah, and honestly, that exact thought process is what got me here because I will say just before I begin that the partner track, it's changing. It is evolving and it's not what it used to be. For better or worse, financially, it's not what it used to be, right? So you start as an associate for 2 years, let's call it. You move up the rank. Everything is kind of 2 year, 2 years, 3 years until you get to senior manager, which is like the step before partner at Deloitte. And that's where I was when I decided to exit. And I always said to myself, I want to make it to senior manager. I want to look around. You are in a leadership position at that point. You kind of the curtains pulled back and you see like what does it really take to be a partner here. And I will say it would have been probably, and I know it's extending too, right? Like the time it takes now to get to partners extending. So it's talk about delayed gratification, right? And the sweat equity that is required to get there. I almost feel like, and I think a lot of my old coworkers would kind of, hate me saying this, but it almost feels like you're almost a pledge in your fraternity or sorority as a senior manager. And I think that is kind of, I looked around and was like, I'd rather go build something for myself at this point. I'm just building something for someone else. And I said, if I'm going to commit, I'm going to be all in. It's not going to go through this, And so that's where I was like, I think now's the time to take a chance.
Cool. And then you made the jump. You made the jump, I'd say, kind of half entrepreneurship on your end, right? Like I'd say it's like a
Yeah.
nice middle ground where you're, an employee who has some profit sharing equity, or like how that's structured, right? Like how do you think about that in terms of you're looking at your options, right? Because you had obviously the option of staying, going the partner track. You had the option of
Mm-hmm.
going out and doing your own thing entirely, or kind of this like middle ground that I feel like you took. Like how do you decide that that path was best for you and your skills and you're failing all those things?
Yeah. So it's funny because I thought I was going to go buy my own business, right? That's, at first I was like, well, I'm going to go do something else. Then I'm going to go buy my own business. I was all over the place. And I really
Sure.
had thought about this. I've been contemplating this for a long time, the what if. I kept waiting for the right moment to try something more entrepreneurial, right? I had that itch. I really wanted to. I just didn't know what it was. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. But then I had kids. And something really shifted. And not because I suddenly had more time or less risk, right? Quite the opposite. But I just started thinking about kind of what they were seeing. And I tell them all the time, like, just try it. And I had to ask myself, like, am I actually living that? The answer was no. So when the Pave came along, I'd been talking to a lot of people. I'd started kind of that education, right? Like a consultant is nothing if it's not very prepared.
Sure.
And so I had started talking to a lot of people. And when I came across the Pave, it felt like, okay, I believe that risk is a muscle that we need to exercise, right? And I had not exercised that a ton in my past. And I would argue to say that people like as deep as I was in corporate America probably can relate to that as well, right? So I thought, okay, what's the worst that can happen is I don't have a job. Well, that's, I got 3 kids. I have a house. Like there's, things that I need to do, but it definitely felt like, okay, let me go in and learn as much as I can. And then maybe I'll go do it myself. Well, funny because I got in here and I'm like, I'm never leaving. This is the best. And what makes it the best are the people. But that, so that's kind of what happened and why I ended up where I did. And I really feel like timing is everything. And this opportunity kind of came to me and I just couldn't say no.
Cool. And I want to dive deeper back into that too in just a bit. But first, I kind of more so cover the like actual skill sets that you built at Deloitte. Like I think that's off myself too, is that, I spent 7-ish years in corporate, right? And a lot of the skill sets that I learned in corporate helped me massively today. So you kind of think the other route of, hey, if I would have skipped all this and gotten full on myself early on, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I would have been as successful or had the opportunity I have today if I didn't take that path there. I think for you, it's a lot of the same thing, right? A lot of the skill sets that you learn in a company like a Deloitte doing the work helps you massively be as effective as you are right now by learning those things. If you kind of break it down, what are like the tangible things you're actually doing at Deloitte that you feel like transfer over in a big way to what it is you're helping achieve here today?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question because I think when people think of consultants historically, one, people are like, I don't really know exactly what that means. It can mean so many things.
And also, one more thing
But
too. So if you're listening to this too, like
yeah,
Alex does so many different things inside the company, which we can dive into as well here. But
yeah.
like she does a massive variety of things, is awesome at all of them too. So I think that this will help give some context as to like how important each skill set she's learned is.
Yeah. And so I will say that I think consulting, it teaches you some really great soft skills, right? How to problem solve, right? And I mean like structured problem solving while dealing with completely ambiguous situations. And when you think about it, like you think about corporate America and for these Fortune 100 companies that we're solving very complex problems for, I'm going into a business. I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't know their business better than they know themselves, but I know how to solve a problem. I know how to break it down. And that's really what I think a good consultant learns and kind of really understands is how to break down a problem to get through it. I think the other thing that I've really learned is how to build trust, right? How to walk into a room and build trust quickly. In consulting, you're always the outsider. You're coming into someone else's business at a table and you're judged quickly, right? The person that you're working with might not be the person that actually brought you in. I worked with, very closely with CFOs. I was in our finance strategy, and the CFO might, they might have said, yeah, this is the project I want to do. But the person we're working with is like, why are you here? So you really have to
And
learn
so
how
play
to
that out.
build trust quickly.
So you're hired by the
Yeah.
CFO, right? CFO says, "Hey, we've approved
Yeah.
$250,000 this engagement for Deloitte," right?
Mhm.
And then who's usually actually delivering the work? Is it like the director of finance, the VP of finance? Like
Yep.
who's that person in the org? Because they may feel
Yep.
like, hey, we signed off on this. The company feels they need it. I have to get this stuff done. And this person's coming in here and they may be taking my job. They may be showing that I'm not competent. Like, how do you handle all that?
100%. 100%. Not only that, but they're coming in, they're saying, like, I don't have time to do this project, right? Like, this is a nights and weekends type of project. They have a day job too. So I think that is like, again, it comes back to coming in and building trust and building rapport with these people, right? And helping them understand what you're working towards. And that's something that I use every single day at the Pave, right?
Yeah, because
Is
that's a similar type thing, right? Like you go close to the company,
Mhm.
you then have all of these legacy systems, legacy people, right? Maybe it wasn't
Oh
there for us the
yeah.
company is selling. So like you give us an
No.
example of what went on internally here at the Pave that you've applied that, right? In terms of interactions, certainly
Yeah.
whether it be staff, vendors.
And I'm going to say this, and I don't necessarily think it's true, but it feels it. Sometimes it feels like the stakes are higher here because you're walking into a business with, let's say, three guys down in Texas who have spent their life, it's their life's work, this company, and they're handing it over to you as an owner, saying like, let's make it better. And you're like, I, I want to do you, I want to do right by you. And I want to, I want to propel this forward. And again, comes back to that building trust that you're going to take this and you're going to do something good with it alongside them. The I think that, it's really hard to come into a company where people did not want it to be sold and to get them on board with how you think things should be done, right? In an industry that arguably people say, oh, you're new here. You don't know what's going on. You don't know anything about. That's not new to me, right? In consulting, I'd be on multiple projects at a time. These projects could span like years, they could span months. You never know. But I was industry agnostic. So I would go into a different industry. I was at a phosphate fertilizer company, a chip company, a grocery store. Like the actual product, don't want to say it doesn't matter because it does, but it brings us back to my kind of third point of things that I use every day, and it's process. I spent years helping companies figure out where they were doing the same thing 12 different ways and how to standardize it. And that's exactly what we're doing here in a roll up, right? Every company that we acquire, we come in, they're doing something a different way, whether it's billing, scheduling, fleet management. And my job is to come in and help identify what's the best way to do this and how should we standardize it and move it forward, right?
Okay, so walk us through what that looks like in practice. So we close on a company by the next 45 days. Walk us through what the first 30, 60, 90 days look like when starting to apply those pieces of it to it, right? Of saying, okay, we have to first analyze what's going on. We have to go start making changes. Like, what does that look like in actual practice of how to do that? Because most people say it, right? They're like, okay, we have to go start fix these things. We make the operations better. We put in more systems, right? What does it actually look like in practice from doing it day to day?
Yeah. And I think one interesting thing, people often think that consulting, they come in and they just tell you what you should do and then they leave. It's not wrong, but that's not what I did. At Deloitte, we actually do a lot of implementation as well. So we come in and we advise on, hey, here's, how you should be more efficient, but we also help with the actual implementation. And we see it through. And I will say that, Chris and I talk about this all the time, and I call it post day one, right? Post day one integration. Like, what does that look like? What are the low hanging fruit? What are the things that we know are going to take more time? I think that the most important thing is the culture and the people. I really do. Like, makes or breaks. I always say, people make the place. And I think that is the most important thing. So coming in and building that trust, that is hands down the most important thing in the first 30 days, right?
And so how do you do that?
You've just gone through, spend time with people, help them understand, hey, here's where we're going. Here's where you fit into that, right? Like, we're here with you. We're not coming in to tell you what to do. We want to work together. I think that what I've really seen, and this is not dissimilar to corporate America, it's just at a different scale, but the way people are doing things, a lot of times they think that's the only way it can be done, right? Because that's what they know. And I think bringing people along that journey and helping them to understand, like, hey, we can get more efficient. And that change management piece is so overlooked post day one in integrations of, if you don't have buy-in from these people, your new CRM means nothing, right? They're not going to use it. Who cares? Bad information in, bad information out. So I think the buy-in is really important in building that rapport with people, making sure that you have the right people in the right seats too. And I think that's something that, we've also learned along the way is, who do we need in these seats to propel this forward?
Okay, so walk us through, because there's different types of changes, right? Some are, really quick things, you can get some quick wins, and some are more structural changes that are a big lift, a lot of buy-in, a 3, 6, 12-month process to go through. So walk us through a scenario like you made, what are some small tweaks that may have been made in the past that have made a substantial difference? Because part of this, I'm sure those small wins of showing progress help massively get buy-in from the folks who are inside. So walk us through what a few of those are, and then walk us through from there what you've leveraged those to make some bigger changes overall with more collective buy-in.
Yeah. So when I was at Deloitte, I was really deep in our global business services. And so what that meant, and I'm only talking about this because I think it's been useful at the Pave, but a lot of things is when you're looking at global business services, it's really looking at what can you centralize, what can you optimize processes, right? Like, you got 10 different businesses, billing 10 different ways, right? Like, let's think about something easy, finance. And so how can we pull that out, right? You don't need 10 people doing that. You can have 3 people working more efficiently. Maybe it's, supported by better technology, better processes, et cetera. And that's, when we come into these companies, one of the first things we look at is the finance function. Because when you look at these paving companies and these, mom and pops, or these people who have built it for the last 30 years, it's pretty fundamental. Maybe there's no POs, or, it's the invoicing process is, disparate and, very manual at best. So what are things that we can do to kind of optimize, get better visibility into their financials? I mean, most of our acquisitions, they're on QuickBooks, right? And maybe they're not even GAAP compliant, right? And that's because they've just done what they've known for years. And so getting kind of that structure, getting more insight, getting more forecasting in their financials. I think the finance piece, because a lot of times people are like, that's something I'd be happy to let go of, right?
Sure.
And so I think that kind of has been a way that we've been able to help build trust.
Yeah, and it's also too important to think about who the owner was previously, right? Maybe this was
Mm-hmm.
one, two, three guys from the company. This was not in any like unethical way, but like this was their personal piggy bank. Like they ran it, they took care of the
100%.
employees, and they lived off of what was there in the company. And it wasn't as if they had to go show financials to investors. They didn't have to go show financials to a board, right? Like they were the company. So it wasn't a way of, this is unethical or any kind of bad intent behind it. It was more just we never had to do that.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's kind of, it's like we're not coming in and saying, how could you have done this? This is terrible. They've done what they've known, and it's admirable. They've built these amazing companies, right? I think of Cornerstone, Sam, and I'm like, those guys have built something really special down there. And it's an honor to be part of it, right? And to help grow. And, I'm learning every day from them. And I think they're learning from us. And I think that again, it comes back to that trust and building that trust, right? Of like, hey, we've got your back.
And it's also, so I want to drill into that for a second too. So the three guys who have owned Cornerstone are fantastic. Mm-hmm. And for them, like they were planning on retiring. They were looking at the amount of money in the transaction, right? They're looking at retiring. And now they're like, hey, we want to be here for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Like they love it. I think something we see a lot too is that the owners of these companies, they are doing all of these things like finance that are out of their skill set, out of their realm of what they actually enjoy. So help us kind of walk through of what does that look like for someone who like their perspective changed dramatically in the last few months of we want out to we want in. So like walk us through what that looks like, and maybe listening to you are kind of going through something similar where they are looking to acquire a company and the owner themselves is great and they just are doing the wrong functions for their skill set and what they want to go do at that stage in their life.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me back to what I was talking about earlier about having the right people in the right seat, right? And so, let's take Cornerstone, for example, and Vince. Vince was doing all of the back office, right? Because that's kind of, there are three guys, they split it up. And, we have David who's out there bidding, exceptional bidder. But we started talking and, as we started to pull back from Vince, right? We started to take those finance responsibilities off his plate, free up more of his time for more value-added work. And that is always what I'm thinking is how can we free up time for more value-added work, right? There are ways that we can automate. There are other people that can perform these activities. And what we found is we peeled that away and Vince said, hey, I'm actually pretty good at bidding myself. Like, let me get out there. Our bidding capacity has now doubled, right?
There you go.
And I think that is what we're really seeing. I think that a lot of the buy-in as well from these owners is they see the team that we have. And I think the team we have is extremely unique, Sam. Like you have Jeff, 30 years paving experience. He has built it from the ground up. The stories he tells about driving around paving parking lots, with Jeffrey in his backseat, his son. It's really admirable. Then you have, me, like corporate America, corporate dropout, whatever you want to call me.
Sure.
Recovering corporate. Yeah. Coming in. We have Chris, just completely entrepreneurial. He's been doing this for forever as well. And I think the unique backgrounds that we all bring to the table, it's kind of like we each have a piece of the puzzle. And I think people see that and they value it.
Yeah, it's people also want to feel like they have a chance to win too, right? I think in certain areas you feel like you're drowning, and maybe you get to a place where your skill set and what you want to go do doesn't align to what you're doing anymore. And they built great companies where they can go take home 7 figures plus a year each, and like that's a great business. But it gets to a place too where you're doing things you just don't want to go do anymore. I think that makes a massive difference. And yeah.
And it takes the stress off, right? The stress, I think that, they want to just do the work and they want to do good work and they want to move this forward with us and they want to see like how far we can take it. But they don't want to deal with all of the, inner workings of being an owner anymore. And that's, good for them. They built an amazing company.
Totally. So you see all the take just like finance a quick win and putting people in more of the right seats as more of quick type wins. What are things structurally that have changed or will change, right? That now because of this buy-in, we can actually go get done.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I dream about that, right? Like I said to Chris last night was that when I was kind of thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I was like, man, we haven't even, this is the tip of the iceberg for me because we haven't even gotten into my sweet spot of taking these processes. Like there is so much standardization across the board and we've kind of been waiting and we've been prepping in the background, but we're ready to execute, right? There is technology that I'm excited about supporting our processes. Like technology is not and never will be like and I say this in AI, it's like we're taking everyone's jobs, but it's not a replacement for good process, right? It supports it. And I think that, building in some of that operational excellence is what I'm really excited about moving forward. I'm really excited about our next acquisition and and the operators that we have, coming on board in the business and I think that, I'm excited to continue to learn from these companies that we're and figuring out like, what's the best way to do this?
So also, if you're listening right now too and you're live, feel free to drop questions in here too. We've got no deck to share today as well. So if you got questions, throw them in, but we'll keep going. So you look at this next acquisition and you're like, hey, this guy's a great operator who owns it today. Mm-hmm. I know it's one of the two owners. How do you determine he's a great operator, right? What are things you look at and say, this is someone we want to keep on board, right? And figuring out a great role for them to be a leader in the company. How do you decide that one, that person's the right fit, and two, that they actually really want to be on board too?
Yeah. Well, I think, part of it is, your like how the deal is structured, right? So we have a lot of, seller carry that, they come in and they say like, hey, we want to be part of this. We believe in it. Like we're leaving money on the table. Right. And I think that speaks for itself a lot of times, but you really can, like through the due diligence process, you can really dive in with these operators. And now I will say like each acquisition, when I first started, like I didn't know what I didn't know. And now I know more what to look for. I know more of the red flags. I know more of, the
what are some of those things?
Ask.
So what are some of those things that, early on, you're like, yeah, this is fine just because you don't know what you don't know. And now you're like, dude, no shot.
Yeah. I think, I have really dug into I don't even know where to begin, but because there's a lot of learnings, right? But the WIP, right? Like the WIP, and people are probably like, what are you even talking about? But work in progress for these projects, like how good are they actually at maintaining a WIP, like understanding where they are their projects profitable? I think that,
and so explain for the listeners, for people listening right now, explain what you mean in terms of where they are on that project, for like how we build all those things. So people listening may not like fully understand.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm like laughing at myself because never in a million years did I think I'd be talking about, paving, like WIP. And I'm thinking about like, so it's basically, how much progress you've made on your project, the costs that you have incurred to date. One of the things that I did not fully appreciate is the working capital required to run these companies. You are buying all the materials that you need to perform this job, and you're not getting paid maybe for 60 days, right? 30 to 60 days. And I think I really didn't like fundamentally understand, how important that was to really understand your costs and understand your profitability while you're in it.
Yeah, because
so that's something. Yeah.
It's kind of not easy, but if you're not paying attention, the system can be gamed, right? Where
totally.
You may have a job that is, say, $600,000 over 6 months, right? So in theory, it's about $100,000 of revenue recognition each month. But what may happen is that the project's falling behind. The crew may decide to pull revenue forward. Maybe we're showing 120 in month 1 and 2 and 150 in month 3. And what that means is that you still likely have expenses in those subsequent months. You have to go eat with a lower revenue recognition. So it may look like it's profitable, right? We kind of call it like the lipstick on a pig type scenario in terms of that deal or that project itself you're completing, where if you don't really know what to look for there, it's a very easy to mask a problem for potentially a very long time if you have longer jobs.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it too, like overbilling, like you're making it look better than it is. You haven't completed the work that you've already billed for, right? So when you go to complete the work and, we own the company now and we go to bill, like there's nothing left to bill. So I think, that's been interesting. I think kind of understanding process, like really just talking to these operators, right? And understanding like who does what around here and how does the machine work? I think now I can kind of understand. I can understand so much better, what everyone does and the different pieces of the puzzle that you need. I mean, look in the acquisition that we're about to close on, they have like an exceptional safety director and their safety processes. Like I'm really excited about. Never thought I'd be excited about safety protocol, but it's really important. You know why it's important? That helps to not only is it, the safety of your workers, but your insurance rates are literally based off of your safety protocol and how compliant you are and how, stringent you are. That's actual dollars out the door, right? So things like that, that I think are really important to kind of dive into.
And then, so what else? Like, what are certain things that, you found with this operator that you're like, okay, this guy's a no-brainer, right? So you get the safety piece of it. You have what else in terms of like what makes them really tangible that this guy wants to get on board, he's qualified, or all those things?
Well, I think it's not even just him, but it's how other people talk about him in the company, right? Like you hear, like what do others say about this operator, right? Like, is he a leader? Is he someone people follow? I think, what's their reputation out on the street? I think that's important too, right? He's the face of the company. So what does that look like to the outside world? I think, how they talk to, our diligence team, how open are they? You can kind of tell in a conversation if, they're skirting around something or,
Sure.
if they're pretty forthcoming. And those are things that, you can't teach that. I think that's something that I've learned in my career and something that I feel like I have a good read on people. And I think that's been, kind of something that's really helped me along the way.
Cool. And I want to pivot a little bit, right? So we covered a lot in terms of the actual operations, the companies, and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to the corporate folks that I know reach out to me a handful of times a week. I'm sure you the same thing as well too. And this is the person who is likely in the position that you were in a few years back, or I was in a few years back as well, right? Mid six-figure corporate role, right? Great title, good company, all those things. And they say, I want to go find a company and go break off and do it myself. And they start doing all this searching and looking for companies and doing homework and research. And, I get probably the same amount of calls as you do, and people kind of trying to go figure out what that looks like. So help us understand kind of that thought process that's maybe having, and maybe advice for them, or kind of that, like how they're working through that thought process overall.
Yeah, I actually had this exact conversation on Friday, right? It was a woman, she's a mom as well, and she was just laid off from, one of these huge corporations. Never thought that would happen to her, right? Like, of course, you never do. Corporate America feels very safe, right? And she was like, I think I just want to go buy a business. And she was like, I have a friend who's also looking to do it. And my first piece of advice was, and I'm sure Sam, you can really attest to this too, is make sure you really understand who you're getting into business with, right? Like this is a big deal and this is a big commitment. And getting out of it is not as easy as it is to get into it. And I think that was my kind of first advice to her. But my second piece of advice to her was, I've been in your shoes and start flexing that risk muscle. Like it is a muscle that you need to flex. And each time you do it, it becomes easier. And to be honest, that's why I don't know if many people know this, but I actually invested in the Pave before I ever joined you and Chris. And that to me was flexing that risk muscle, right? Of doing something that is very uncomfortable to me. That's not right. Like in my head, I was told, go to college, get your MBA, get into consulting, climb the corporate ladder, be a partner. Those are the steps. And I was kind of like, okay, if I'm going to start to try and, do something different and, get off of this, corporate ladder, like, what does that look like? I got to start flexing the muscle.
Totally.
And that was my advice to her.
Yeah. And that can be a number of different ways too. Like you don't have to go, like you're spot on. People look at just the whole education system, at least how it was historically, is that it's an assembly line, right? You go into this place to get to this place, to get to this place, to get to this place. And all those things feel very predictable, especially if you go down a route in which you are, doctor, lawyer, accountant, right? A very stable type route. But that risk could be different things based on who you are and kind of what your risk threshold is. So for you, writing a substantial check, right, could be enough of a risk, kind of, push for yourself relative to what you've done historically, that helps you get more comfortable or makes you realize, you know what, this is not for me at all. Each person kind of has like different thresholds they have too, right, in terms of kind of what tolerance you built up for it. Like, I think myself and Chris are probably way on the side of, we'll go ship it, right, in terms of time, effort, energy, and money. I think the first three are actually bigger. For you is the money first. Okay, now I'm comfortable here. Now I can go look at, is this something I want to be a part of with all my time, energy, working operational capital as well in terms of just your effort behind it.
Totally. No, it's so interesting. I look at even a year ago, like how far I've come on that flexing the risk muscle. And Chris and I talk about this a lot. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about, that the relationship that we all have here together. Like I said, this team is, you really can't beat it. But Chris has always said, he can see where I'm coming from with my, risk profile. And we're kind of like, we're chipping away at it, right? Like, I think that it's not something, I don't think you have to dive all in. You really don't. Some people do, right? And I think that's something that you need to really reflect on, and it's unique to every person, but you can chip away at it and get to the same place.
And so what are things?
The one thing one other thing that I just wanted to share is one thing I did share with, this woman who reached out to me is you don't want to get too uncomfortable that you can't like perform at your best, right? You're not focused on, what you need to be doing to building because you're so stressed that you're going to, lose your lunch. And I think that's something that I didn't really appreciate until I got into this with you guys of what, how much risk can I personally take without imploding?
Totally. And I think if there's a way to, like, I look at it as, I think of like the day trader is a great example of this, right? Whether like whatever your views on day trading is, but you can take enough risk in that position without the ability of going to zero. But if you go to zero in that field and your bankability is your entire lifeline of how you earn, if you go to zero, you are SOL. And you then can't come back from it. So I think for people, they have to go figure out there's certain things career-wise you can go take risk on, or money-wise you can go take risk on. But if you put yourself in a position that you don't feel you can come back from, that's a space that you likely shouldn't get to. Like, I know personally, I like certain kinds of stress. I hate personal financial stress, where if I like, pay my rent, does it impact my day-to-day life, right? Those things. So in turn, I keep far more cash on hand now relative to when I was in the corporate world. Because you'd like a very consistent paycheck coming in, right? It's entrepreneur where you then take these risks where in turn your earnings become far less often and more lumpy, right? They can be very good, but you're trading that consistency too. So if you're putting yourself in that spot and you think of, I want to have a good runway here, making sure you're stable in other areas to allow yourself that runway and headspace to do it the right way based on who you are as a person matters so much. And everyone's tolerance and numbers will be different there, but making sure you're personally stable. Yeah.
Well, and the way I look at that right now is kind of like my husband, right? Like he, is in the tech world. He works at Indeed. He's in tech sales. And I'm like, I kind of think of us as the stocks and the bonds. And right now he's the bond and I'm the stock, and that's okay. And that's working, right? Like, my kids still have health insurance and stuff like that. And I can go out and take the risks that I've kind of wanted to. And, that looks different for everyone. And I think that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think that is what, every person I talk to, you can adjust that risk profile for your comfort level.
Well, it's also, I think you guys have done a good job too of there's a balance for someone who has kids or a spouse of what your life will look like if you go do something, right? You're now certain actually taking calls at 8, 9, 10 p.m., right? To get certain things done where you may have a bit of a jacked up schedule sometimes, right? Where there's sprints in terms of what you're working on. Not dissimilar to the consulting world too, in terms of what your life looks like.
I was about to say, when I looked about what when I think about what I left and what those next 10 years were going to look like, I'm like, looked like a lot of missed soccer games, and missed school pickups. And just one kind of funny anecdote on that is I'll never forget. Maybe it must have been my first or second week. calling Chris. I was on the phone with him. I was like, hey, do you think it's okay if I go pick up my kids really quick? And he literally, I mean, he's the nicest guy in the world. And in the nicest way, he was like, why are you asking me this? And it was kind of the assurance I needed, like, all right, I made the right choice here. Because to your point, it's like, yeah, we work a lot, but there's, some also built-in inherent flexibility. And I think I just took us on a tangent, but
No, it's important there too, like understanding just like what it is you're getting into. And
yeah,
more of entrepreneurial type stuff is more of getting your work done versus working structured hours usually. And that could mean,
totally.
working on a Saturday morning the whole morning, but that could also mean getting to
Yeah,
your kid's soccer game at 4 p.m. on a Thursday. Like it just doesn't really just getting your stuff done.
totally. And I think that is, I think it, for a working mom like myself, um, I think it makes us very valuable, right? I'm, I think that the stakes are higher when I have my kids watching me. It makes me sharper, more decisive, more focused. And I think that, kind of lends itself to this more entrepreneurial world now where I know what I need to get done and I'm going to get it done.
And so the people listening to this too, like, who do you think maybe the path that you took is more for, right? Because I kind of look at it as there's really three lanes effectively, right? And you've kind of gone from
Mm-hmm.
like the right lane to probably like the center lane, not full left lane in terms of kind of like driving the fast lane
Maybe
just
not
yet.
yet.
Like, yeah. Like, who do you kind of think
Right.
those things are for? And do you think that's like, do you see this as a bridge in the future, maybe going all in on that lane in the future for yourself, or kind of like, how do you think about it?
Yeah. I think about it different now that I'm actually on this side than I did. Right. To me, this was the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life. And I think people were like, what are you doing? You're going to go like paving? They're like, wait, are you going to go like pave the streets? It's like, maybe, I don't know. We'll see what we'll see. Right. Like, the one thing about these companies you get in and, we're doing it like you are getting your hands dirty in every piece of the business. Things that I didn't even realize that I would be part of. But I think that I what and I honestly just blanked on your actual question here. So ask me again or say it
No,
again.
I was saying more so of like, how do you think about just the path of going from, like, kind of who do you
Oh,
like more so like
yeah.
who you think is for, right? That person
Who?
who
Who is
is,
it for?
yeah.
I think it's for someone that has that entrepreneurial itch and they don't quite know, right? Like they don't quite know how to do it. And I think it's this step of, getting into something, let's call it smaller, just from we're not in a Fortune 100 company, and building something. I think it's for someone who really does, they want to build something and maybe they're tired of building it for someone else, right? But they're not willing to, and it's not that they're not willing, but they just can't take that full leap of, I'm going to, risk it all and go build something from scratch. It's really hard to go build something from scratch. It's hard to buy something and then build it. Like it's all hard. It's just kind of what hard are you comfortable with or more comfortable with? I don't think any of it's super comfortable.
Well, I know we're coming up on time too. So we've got some questions that were sent ahead of time and we'll open up to questions from the audience too. So one question, which is great. I'm a VP in a corporate role and I'm looking at potentially either starting my own thing or kind of building something with a partner. How do you think about kind of vetting the right partners to go have? But it seems like you have a good working relationship with, Chris and the rest of the group here. Like, how do
Mhm.
you go think about how someone can maybe go vet a partner before you get into that kind of long-term relationship?
Yeah. And I'm sure, Sam, you probably have some thoughts on this too. I think we talk about this a lot, but the number one thing, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is trust. I tell Chris every single day, I trust you. And I mean it. Like, I mean it. He has given me like absolutely no reason not to. And I really do. I think you really need to think about not when the times are good, but when the times are hard, like, will this person have your back? Because the other thing I think to think about is what do you both bring to the table, right? I think that it's really glamorous to say, oh, I'm going to go buy a business. I'm going to go, I'm going to go run this business. I'm going to have my own business with my partner. But who's going to do all the work, right? And I think that is something that people really need to kind of think about. And would I say this is like the best thing? It's kind of like it's like a marriage almost, right? Or, a partnership. It is a partnership, but it really is. It's like you spend so much time with these people. Like, would you trust them with your livelihood?
Yeah, it's super important too. Like the who in what you're doing things matters quite a
Mhm.
bit. And I think you're spot on. Like the skill sets have to be complementary and the personalities have to be
Complementary.
complementary is really important
Yes.
too, right? In terms of people have to do certain unique things well, right? Whether they
Yep.
are more of a sergeant, whether they are more of a financial person, whether they're more of the people person, like they have to be able to put pieces together that all go really well together. And
Hmm.
we've got some more here too. So who shouldn't like make this jump, right? If you kind of think of, maybe, think of the calls you've gotten, people that are saying, I'm thinking about this, I want out, right? What are kind of signs you've seen from people who are contemplated going to do something that you're like, dude, no shot?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think a lot of times the people who don't possess the soft skills, the people who aren't willing to kind of, walk into any room and, go introduce themselves to people, right? You got to really put yourself out there in this world. You really do. You have to, there's a lot of different types of people that you will interact with, and you have to understand, like, how do you resonate with each of them? And I think that if you're the type of person that, you know, you don't feel like that doesn't excite you and is not something, like, it might not be for you unless you have like an incredible partner who's willing to go and do all of that.
Totally. Cool. Well, let's open up to the audience, see anyone here who's listening on too. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the channel too, so we can go start covering some of them. Yeah, the partnership piece is so crucial. Like you have to have people who are okay playing different types of roles. I think something also big
Totally.
too that's not talked about is like who wants or needs spotlight, right? Like I think you'll
Yeah.
see ego kill a lot of partnerships, a lot of deals, a lot of businesses where the who gets credit for what matters people versus just getting the actual thing done. So I think that's a big thing we see too.
Totally. Well, and on that point, Sam, and one thing, I had these teams and I mentored a lot of people in at Deloitte that I still keep in touch with. And I really care. I really care about them. And people will call me and be like, I saw this on an Instagram reel. Like, this looks so cool. What, like, people can say anything, right? And I think that has been, I feel like, in corporate America, you can be a little naive, right? To the realities of, the other side, though the grass is greener. Like, I think realizing that what people, just because someone says something doesn't mean it's true, right? And I think that has been something that, you see, like, oh, I bought this business and now I'm making this amount of money. Like, you don't know the full story.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think of it as like, did you ever watch Suits?
I love Suits, yes.
So I think of it as like people think about, I want to go in corporate law and like I want to be Harvey Specter, who is one of the biggest
Yes.
badasses in TV, hands down. But you think of it as like, you're not going to be spending 95% of your time negotiating big deals in person with people. Like it's not your,
Yes.
it's a lot more of like the, stuff they cut behind the scenes that goes on versus just that highlight moment all the time.
Well, and you're thinking about where he is, right? And not what it took to get there and what he had to do to get there. You look at the bullpen, right? Where all the associates are, and it's like, that's 10 years of your life that and the Harvey Specter isn't guaranteed, right? Like, none of this is guaranteed. I think that was something that I had to kind of, wrap my head around.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting too, if you look at just partnerships too, going back to that piece where they are in their stage of life, I think matters a lot too, right?
Yeah.
Where there's certain values, like, for example, we run a strategic partner, right? Being, Jeff and Jeffrey, and you can look at the business they've built with what they have so far, and you look at their threshold for, what they need to go to be successful. They're not going to go cut corners to go take a few bucks home themselves extra. They want the bigger potential piece of it. They already have a great business that they built so far today. So understanding what the end outcome and what that barrier for success is so crucial. Like for them to make an extra $1 million a year, they don't care, right? They want to have something that can be massively sustainable and scalable and like really truly get, whether it be a business that can be passed down for generations, business that can be sold, right? Doing things the right way matters a lot.
Totally. And I think that has been really eye-opening for me And is, again, I'm going to come back to the team that we have here and the different like mindsets that we have brought together, right? I think it's honestly, it's extremely unique. And kind of unstoppable, if you ask me.
There you go. Well, hey, let's end on that in terms of the show. So again, everyone, thanks for hopping on and spending your Tuesday with us too. This will get shared here. But before we jump, any last words for just kind of people listening in who may be in your spot kind of thinking about what's going to do next?
I think about, again, it comes back to my kids and looking back and like, I always tell them like, just try it. And I'm like, just try it, whatever that may be. Like, start to flex that wrist muscle if that's something that interests you, but life's short, like take the risk.
I like it. Cool. Alex, thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam.